Hello and welcome to Pro Modelers. One of this month's builds we're going to be doing is the Hasegawa 1/48 scale F-14D Tomcat. We're going to be using the Aries resin cockpit set with it as well. Now the thing with the kit, if you haven't seen or built it before, the first thing that will grab you is that the box is absolutely chocker full of stuff. For getting any aftermarket parts you might use, but you'll certainly get quite a lot in the box. Now obviously we've got our decals and our instructions, but it is literally crammed up to the top. A lot of boxes you get, they're quite empty. One little thing you'll get here is your little box here. This houses all your rubber photo etch and metal parts, and for that you get a nice little photo etch fret which does the boarding ladder, the mirrors and the little linking device for the canopy that goes to the fuselage. Metal wheels, sometimes they have little bits of sort of mismold and flashing on them that you have to take care of, but those ones look quite nice. And rubber wheels. Now I know there's certainly a bit of a debate over how long rubber wheels last, and obviously getting weight on wheels effect with rubber wheels isn't quite as easy. The debate about rubber wheels, how long they last, I think it depends. Usual thing, if they're in direct sunlight, the type of lighting conditions they're in, if they're behind UV glass, usual type of things, because obviously if they're not and they are in sunlight, obviously they'll get brittle and break down quite quickly. I've had them on various models I've done now sort of 10 years and they're still fine. So the kit itself, you see, we're all still bagged up and everything. It's pretty substantial as in the parts count. Obviously you've got different versions of the Tomcat. You've got A, the B and the D. Basically the B is an upgraded version of the A, and the D was its own aircraft, so to speak. So what they've actually done, there's a lot of parts which do both. Unfortunately you can't backdate with the actual kit, as they are they use different engines, and obviously you don't get that type of engine in here. But this is the D kit, so if I show you a few things off the screws here, the way it breaks down. Now it's quite complex the way that this is actually going to break down. If you remember when we did the Super Hornet, it was quite complex the way it went together. Well, this is no difference. Obviously you've got the top half of the fuselage and the bottom half go together as in one section, and then you have to build all the sort of the air intake and everything else like that, whilst the fuselages are the same as well. So that's that. This is one of the sprues which is different, which is actually the different engine, the F-100 engine. So obviously you get the sprue for that, where you would get, obviously if you're doing the A version, the different sprue. It's quite complex putting that together as well to make it meet. There's the bottom half, as you can see, of the fuselage, and obviously we've got big holes and all this needs filling up and doing correctly, like that. So that's quite a bit of a thing. Two sprues the same. You've got for the fuel tanks, the pylons, and obviously the seats. Now the seats themselves aren't too bad. You get little mouldings here for the actual seat belts on there, obviously the pull handles, various bits and pieces like that. So that's those. So you also get two of those. Then obviously another sprue that's different to the others, you get the upgraded. This has got the newer ejection seats on there. Obviously we're going to be using the resin ones anyway, and obviously the targeting pods for and the sensors for the chin underneath the nose. As you can see here, we've got this part here and this part here. These are the actual the air brake settings on this, and obviously you get different types of these as well, that the way they actually go depending on the kit you'll get, because the back end is slightly, ever so slightly different, and they tend to be a bit complex to get together, but I'm going to do that in a different way. Undercarriage, quite complicated, it goes together, various parts. Quite a nice thing, it's got a swivel turn nose wheel as well. There's no weapons obviously in the kit being Hasegawa, but you do get the reconnaissance pod for the bottom, so that's there. And obviously the wings, obviously they're again quite complex the way they actually go together. It's a multi-part. Obviously you can have it with the flaps deployed, or obviously the wings folded back for storage. So depending on which way you do it, and obviously you've got to make up the wheelbase. Now you can get resin, Aries do resin wheelbase for them, but to be quite honest, they're quite detailed. I don't know how well you can see this on camera here, but up here they're quite detailed anyway. You get some nice line. By the time they've had a wash, they're not so much of a problem, and obviously for display purposes, when they're sat, you know, unless you're going to be flicking it over and having a good look at it, you're not really going to see. So the other thing we're going to be using is the Aries F-14D cockpit, which is updated. Usual thing with those, you'll get the instructions, the actual parts. Now, unfortunately, I've had a look at these before. Aries, if you're listening, can we not do this bag business? Because so many times things get broken off, and it's happened here. Don't know how well you can actually see this, but actually on this resin cockpit, it's a lovely, fantastically detailed. But obviously you've got your throttle down here is in one bit. Normally on every other one I've used, it's normally snapped off, it's still there. And obviously we've got the control stick for the weapons system over here is okay. But at the back here, if you can see here, but this side is bent right back, this side has been sheared off. So you sort of have to go and find the parts around the cockpit to actually do that, and luckily we have got it. So you do have to be, you know, as you can see here, we've got a little ring there, which I presume is off one of the seats, is snapped off. And obviously if they would just use a little bit of foam, I think, to hold them in place, it would stop them rattling around. The other thing as well, these boxes do tend to be a bit weak and wobbly. They're not the sort of strongest boxes that sort of aftermarket parts come in. I think it would be better to put them in a nice firm sort of shrink wrap, you know, the actual 4-pack ones that they use for the other bits and pieces like these. I don't know if they're swapping over to these. This is the one for the Thunderbolt, the cockpit, but because it's on a bit of foam and it's holding it in place, and it's very, very strong. If you're changing over, brilliant. If you're not, can you do it please? Okay, what else you're going to get? Photo etch, same type of thing. It's going to be for the harnesses and the mirrors. Obviously we get those with the actual kit as well. We don't get the harnesses, but obviously the actual mirrors. Very nice detailed cockpit. It's not photo etch for the majority of it. There's a few little photo etch parts, but most of it is. This is the main difference from the reason we've gone for the resin cockpit over the actual kit part. Is at the top here. We get this the data link bit at the top here, and obviously you get a nice big screen, and it's slightly different all down on this back cockpit. The front one's basically the same, but certainly the back one is a lot different. What we're going to do, we're not going to hang around too much about detailing this actual cockpit set, because it's very, very similar in a lot of ways to the F-15E cockpit that I did, the Aries one. So if you want to know exactly how I did it and went about doing it, please have a look at those. It's a 2-part show. I think it's about sort of 30-35 minutes in total, and I go right the way through just talking about it, and I think it's in the advanced modelling section on the tutorials page. Obviously I'll talk about it as I go, but it won't be as detailed as that, because obviously it's all covered in there. We're looking forward to it. We're still waiting on decals, so I'm not going to say what markings it's going to be in, because it's going to be a surprise to me as well, probably. This one isn't a commission either, so we can have a play and a little bit of fun with it as well. Okay, so as you can see probably by the debris around here, we started work on the resin cockpit. Now basically all we've done for the moment is take off the plugs that hold the rear cockpit and the front cockpit together. We've trimmed up the back one just a little bit, but you don't have to totally take it out. Now, the instructions you get with it tell you absolutely nothing, so, you know, thanks for that. So it doesn't actually tell you which parts of the cockpit you have to take out. So this is where, you know, I've been test fitting and going around and making sure they're all okay. Now, if I bring you in just a little bit, right, to show you what we've really got here. If you imagine, this is the original kit part, although you would have some, you would have some little plugs just here, and you've got one at the rear, at the back there. I've obviously taken those out. Now, if we compare it to the other side, you can see what we've done. There we go. So if you can see that, we've actually thinned out, you've got this wall down here, which is the top of the cockpit, like that. We've basically, on this side, we've taken it out, we've sanded that wall completely off, and then around the front here, we've sanded this out, where we've still got to do this side. So that's what we've basically done. Now the problem is obviously getting it all still to fit in and really making it all fit. The actual side walls of the cockpit don't go in particularly well, and obviously what I'm trying to do is paint this, get it all fitted, dry fitted, and I know it works, then we can paint it all up. The trouble being, obviously, these are a little bit of a tight fit to get in. So what we've done, we've thinned out that side wall. I don't know how well you can actually see this at the moment, but basically it's going to fit in like so. and be on there like that on that side wall. So you've actually got the actual location for the canopy coming down pins become the new top, whereas obviously on this side over here, bring you out a bit, they would normally rest on the top here. We've actually taken that out, so if that makes a bit of sense. And then obviously if we just pop the front panel in there like that, and then it all will sit in there just like that. Now I know it's a bit tricky to see at the moment, but there's a few little gaps, but it gives you a rough idea of how it's all going to fit. Now back here by my thumb, just here, as you can see, we've got a gap, so we're going to have to take care of that with a little bit of plasticard. Now the trouble being is there's no, it's not a mistake or something like that, it really is just too thin, so we're going to have to pad that out with a little bit of plasticard. We're going to use, I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do, but we'll then cut it down and sand it and blend it all in, so that's not a problem. So if that gives you a rough idea of how it's going to fit like that, then what I'll do is I'll carry on now, and obviously we'll get the other half fitted. So both these sides are the same. So just putting it in, so we can get these to both look the same, and then the bottom one will marry up with the top. Okay, so we've continued test fitting and dry fitting. Now let's just bring you up to speed with what we've done. We've taken out, you actually see at the bottom here, the plug. Now you don't have to go in perhaps like you would have to do certainly on the Phantom kits, things like that. Literally just follow the line and take the plug out. You don't have to go all the way down, and all I've done is trim the back bit in as well. Got a bit of blue tack holding the front in. Now the reason we've done this is we put the front wheel well together, because we need to make sure the cockpit fits on top, of which it does. Obviously we're just dry fitting all these parts at the moment. When we say dry fitting, obviously we mean without any glue. But there we go, we haven't got the side wall on, so we've got a small gap, but basically it does all fit in there like that. And obviously we've got the wheel well has got a little bit of clearance on the bottom as well, so that all fits, and that was the major hurdle to make sure it's all in. So we've got the cockpit halves all done now, and this is all finished, and the cockpit all fits in there and we're all okay. So what we need to do now is really get this cockpit tub all painted up, and for that we're going to be using Tamiya XF54, which is the gold grey, which is the correct colour from the inside, and then we can go through the process of picking things out. Okay, so as you can see we've got the grey work all done inside here in the cockpit, and I've just picked out all the little panels and bits and pieces in black as well. Now that's all dry, so what I'm actually doing now is just going around with a little bit of the light wash and putting in, as you can see we've done this one already, in the little demarcation areas. We see the white. So all we do, we use our Pro Modeller's light wash, and if I do it in this one in here, if I pop a little bit of blue tack just to centre that up a bit, makes it easier to see. There we go, so we just take in Pro Modeller's light wash and we just put in a drop in the middle, just like that. Then all you do with your brush, you just drag it down each one. Now at the moment you might think, oh, it looks a bit big, but you'll see in a moment it starts to thin out quite a bit. So we're just going to fill up little dials and bits and pieces as we go. A bit too much there, that's what we're doing. Just going to pull that around and we'll just give it all some depth. Now as I said before, use the bubbly bit on the top because it helps to really get it in amongst it all. Okay, so once you've got it like that, all you do, grab yourself a little bit of paper towel, that's one side, dry off your brush, okay, and then just go round and suck out with your brush little bits of wash where it's a little bit too thick, and you can just dab off little bits where perhaps it's a little bit too heavy. And perhaps you don't want it in amongst the dials quite as much. So there we go, we do it like that, and we just take it off this top edge. There we go. So we do it like that, and then obviously we can just work our way around the rest of the model itself. So if we just do a bit over here on this one back here by this dial, so all we're going to do, pop it in the middle and then just drag it down each area. There we go, just like that.
to do the demarcations. Now what I'll do is I'll take a photo of this in a moment once we're done to sort of show you what we've got. Okay, and as I say, I know I had an email the other day with somebody saying they tried it with white paint. Trouble with that is, if you go over, you're sort of left with it, whereas if we do it this way, you just pull it a bit around that area there so we get some nice dusty switches. Yeah, the trouble is if you do it with a bit of white paint, you tend to not be able to get it off afterwards. So there we go, we just go around like that. Okay, and then we're just going to take out any areas that are a little bit too heavy with a paintbrush, just like that. Now the great thing with this is it gives it that dusty look, and when you look in most modern fighters, unless they're new, they have that sort of warm dusty look. But there we go, that gives it those sort of the demarcation lines. So we just got to do these front ones in here.
Okay, with a lot of dry fitting, you're going to have to really, each one's going to be slightly different. But what I've basically done, as you can see probably down the side here, I've really gone to town with the old Dremel and using the hoover around to suck up all the resin dust, because remember this stuff is toxic, so you really don't want to breathe it in. But as you can see down here is the super glue line where I actually super glued the side on. We've got very, very close to it back here. And if you look down the front, we've pinched in the very front, and we've really taken shaves just down below this HUD, the front instrument panel there, and shaved it right in to make it close. Also, we've shaved in quite a lot round the back edge here as well to make it all fit in. We've got the top panel is just here, but we'll actually fit that in a bit later on because I'm worried about it getting damaged at the moment. So what we've done, we've installed the front wheel well. Sorry, there you go. We've installed the front wheel well into the actual front fuselage here. Now the other thing also I've done, you might notice I've got some holes at the front. So when you join these bits up, we have a hole. Now the reason I did that is so I could literally see what was going on inside there when I was test fitting and getting this in. Now your main thing where you guide where you're going to get this in is actually this step just down here. Now this step here aligns to the outer one here, the steps that come down, and it goes in. But really it's one of those things you're really going to have to play and fit with it to actually get it in. Once it's in, you'll know it's in fine. The only small mistake I made on my part, I got a little bit carried away with the old knife when I was cutting, and I cut this tab back here. As you can see, he's got this side. I went straight along with it, so obviously we've got to do that. But you've got to trim out this front HUD area obviously quite a lot and thin it right back, just so you've got enough still to be able to get the actual clear part to sit on top still. The other thing also I did, just to make things easier, is underneath here as well, I've actually sanded it to thin it out slightly so it all sticks up. Now I've masked up all the canopy parts because we needed to know it's got the same width, because obviously when you're fitting resin parts, what you want to make sure is obviously when you've got it like this and it's just the plastic, you know this top bit is going to fit and it's going to be a fine fit. But obviously when you've got a lump of resin in there, it sometimes sort of, you know, spreads it out slightly. So what we did, we popped it in just like that, and then we got the other side up there as well, holding it like that, so we're in there, and then we could put the cockpit on top to see and make sure that it's thin enough. And that's why I had to sand off quite a bit down these sides, because it was bulging slightly over, so there was a big step if you like from the clear part. And obviously remember, you've also got the canopy there to do. We're going to have to pinch in this front area. There's still a slight gap back there, but when you pinch it in quite heavily, it's to put the front glass on there as well and to make sure it all still fits, because obviously if it's too wide you're going to get a step again. So they're just little things. If these clear parts fit on the top, you know you're in there and it's good to go. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to get this glued in just by using super glue. Obviously it's a nice fit there with the actual with the main gear well, sorry, the front gear well. So we're going to use super glue to obviously fix the resin part in the side, so obviously we'll just drop it down the sides in there, and then we're going to use a little bit of super glue with a little bit of kicker just to get that around in the top. Okay, so that's our cockpit section all done now. The tub is all in there. Broke a few little bits off, being a bit clumsy, which I have to glue on at a later date, but it's all gone together very, very well. The actual tub itself has fitted in there. It's quite a tight fit, to say the least, because the plastic, the actual styrene itself is quite brittle. You're going to have to be careful. I actually made a small crack trying to get it in there, just down there, and I did it again here where there's a slight, there's an indentation on the inside, and when I had a rubber band around it, it pulled in and made a hairline crack actually in the styrene, in the plastic itself. So I've given a bit of super glue and a sand over. I'm going to have to rescribe that area and this area up here just above the air-to-air refueling probe door. So that's that done, but it's all in there now. It's quite heavy, and whilst we're talking of heavy, I've done the nose section as well. It's calling out for 12 grams of weight. Now normally I always put a little bit more in because I don't really want it to be a tail sitter, but actually with this one I have stuck with 12 because we've got the resin cockpit and obviously we've got the seats as well, so it's going to take up quite a bit of the weight. Just in here I've done it super glue, just hold it with a little bit of lead roll. I've got a little lead roll here that I use and cut bits off as when needed, and then I've actually used a little bit of gator glue or PVA glue just around the outside, just in case obviously the super glue at some point it might get old, frail, and we don't want it rattling around. So that's that done. When you marry up the two, it's not the greatest fit in the world. The nose section is a tiny bit wider than the actual the nose cone itself. So what I've actually done to compensate is just sanded very, very gently off around this entire ring. So when this sits on now, it's a good fit. So we'll get that glued on in a moment, and that'll be the nose section done. And then we can move on with the rest of the build. Okay, so now we're moving on. We can start on the main parts of the fuselage. Now, as we said before, it's a top and bottom half goes together. So what we've got to do now is build the wheel wells. Now you can buy resin replacement. Aries do one. It's called for the A kit, but obviously it's standard through A through to D. They all do the same thing. It's quite complex how it all goes together. It takes a little bit of sort of jogging around to make sure you get it in the right order. I always start with this curved piece first. That's going to go in here. It's going to go right in here. So what we do, we just put a drop of glue, liquid, run it on the outside. I'm going to pop that there to bite and let that just get to going. Then what happens is you've got quite nicely detailed with various bits and pieces on there. So then obviously this one goes down in this little trench at the front. So there we go, you run the glue. And if you do this with a liquid poly like this, you can then, if you just bring that out a bit, you can then manoeuvre them all round into position and get them all to line up quite nicely. Okay, so we've got those in there now. Now also I've opened up the holes for the outer pylons, and at this point you can make your decision of what holes to open up, obviously for the underside. You don't have to do that, you can actually just line them up manually afterwards and cut the tabs off for the Phoenix racks on the bottom, whichever way you're going to do it. So you don't necessarily have to do it now. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. So there we go, that's that. They're in. Then what you do, you take your top half, again checking for flashing all the way around, like here I can actually feel it, so just give it a light rub all your areas and make sure you're all okay. And then what happens is you get your location pins down here. For them, this is where the swing wings, the actual joints, they don't, a lot of the smaller kits you might imagine you hook the wings over and that gives it, these actually they click over the top of them. So it's quite a bit of a delicate process, so I always line those up first. So once you've got those over the top, you can line up and work your way around, and then we'll just glue it together as we go. So we'll just give it running the glue down, plenty of it down this edge because it usually needs a lot of sanding and filling just to make that all blend in well. Sometimes it works quite nicely, but by the time you give it a sand off, and obviously you've rescribed and things like that. So we'll just hold this edge and we'll glue up the entire of the fuselage. Okay, so there we go, that's that together and done. Now what we're going to do at the same time, something a little bit different. Normally you've got this back end here with the air brake assembly. And it clicks together like this, and the instructions would have you on part number 20, glue it together and then put it in the end. The trouble is, one, it never seems to be a very good fit around this area, and secondly, you do tend to get a join line at the top, which is very, very noticeable, which will be back here just in front of this rubber band. I'll just pop that off a moment. And they stand out, and when you look at other people's, you can see it. It's one of those areas where you'll look at to see how good it is. So I was having a think about the best way of getting around the problem. So what I've come up with is to do it in separate parts. So what we're going to do now, obviously, one thing to mention, very, very flashy. This particular sprue, which I think is on the E and A type sprues, very, very flashy on this particular kit. I don't know if they're like it all the way through, but certainly this one is. So what we're going to do is slide it in like we've done there, and then we're going to actually get it into position by lifting it, putting your finger over it and then lifting it up to it, and then running your finger over and seeing if it's a nice joint, which that one is, if you can see it there. And then if it is up high a little area, you can, you know, literally just give it a little nudge to get it so it's all at the right height, and then that way that'll save you having that problem of actually, you know, slotting it in, and you know, you get a step or a different line or something like that. So what we're going to do is going to get that all into position like that, and then we're going to line it up with the top, the actual line there down the sides here for the sides of these engines. So we're all in like that. We just need to move this side a little higher, I would prefer. Having a look, okay, just a little, actually there's a tiniest amount I'd like to just take care of along here. So we'll do, just use a knife. I'm just going to cut a little bit of plastic out from the underside there, and then we'll lift it up. Gotcha. Perfect. Okay. And then all we do, extra thin in those gaps. Okay. And then we're just going to get this engine up to the right area. We start at this side first. There we go. Just do a little bit of tidying up with the old glue and let the capillary action along. So we've got this top half now is imperfect. Now obviously underneath, as you can see, the bottom half of these engines push up into these gaps, but I want that to totally dry off first, and make sure we've got a nice good amount of glue in there so we've got all the joints welded up. Let it totally dry, and then we're going to pull this underside, these engine curves here, up underneath, and they'll glue to the inside, and then with any luck, if I've done this right, this one will drop in and slide in and have a perfect fit. So there we go, that's that top part all done and is in there very, very nicely. So we need to let that dry now. The other things it tells you to do around about this time is to put these areas in here where the wings swing back, and obviously you have to pick the one if you have the wings out or swung back, you do it. I tend to do them afterwards because it's a lot easier to paint, so leave them actually off for the moment. The other things we can be doing at the moment is the actual engines, the actual intakes. Let me just pop that over there. So as we come along, we can move that slightly out of the way for one moment. The actual intakes and the engine ducts themselves. So if we just get all these cut out a moment. Okay, the other thing, obviously it's quite flashy, these areas here, but actually in these intakes, I don't know how well you can see it there, but we've actually got some little ejector pin marks. Now you can't really complain about them because they're not very deep, and also they're going to be set quite far back inside, so you're not really going to notice them, but they're very easy to get rid of if you wanted to. Just got the file into the actual groove there, and we just keep filing away at it to take them down. As I say, they're not very deep. We just do the first one. There we go, that's the first one done, it's out of the way, and obviously we've got the second one back there to do. So we get those done.